How does your body just know when to feel energized or sleepy or hungry? It feels totally automatic, right? But behind the scenes, there's this constant storm of messages flying around, a biological wireless network that's running 24/7. Well, in this explainer, we're going to tap into that network and decode the secret messages of the endocrine system.
And to really get this network, you've got to start with its messengers, the hormones. The name itself is the first clue. It comes from the Greek word hormon, which literally means to set in motion. And that's exactly what they do. They are the body's action starters, the chemical signals that kickstart pretty much everything. So, here's the game plan. We're going to follow the life of a single hormonal message from start to finish. We'll start with the network itself, see how these incredible messengers evolved, watch them get created and sent out, see how they travel through the bloodstream, how they deliver their message, and finally, how the whole system knows the job is done.
You know, unlike your nervous system with its neat and tidy nerves, or your circulatory system with its veins and arteries, the endocrine system doesn't really have any physical borders. It's this decentralized network of glands and messengers, all working together for one main goal, maintaining what we call homeostasis. Just think of it as the body's constant effort to keep you in that perfect, just right zone, no matter what's going on. So, who exactly are these messengers? Well, they didn't just pop up overnight. I mean, think about it. As life on Earth got more and more complex, going from single cells to, well, us, the job of staying in balance got way, way harder. Hormones had to evolve right alongside life itself, becoming more diverse and specialized to handle everything from stress to growth. Okay, so if you break them down chemically, these messengers fall into three main families. You've got the peptides, and these are by far the most common type. Then the amines and the steroids. And this is where it gets really clever, because their basic chemical structure determines their entire mission. And this right here is the fundamental split in how they operate. On one side, you have water-loving hormones, like peptides. They dissolve and travel easily in the blood, but they can't get through a cell's fatty membrane, so they act like they're ringing the doorbell. They bind it to a receptor on the outside of the cell, which then kicks off a chain reaction on the inside. But on the other side, you've got water-fearing hormones, like steroids. They need a special ride to get through the blood, but once they arrive at their target, they have an all-access pass. They can slip right inside the cell and give their orders directly. This one difference, it changes everything. All right, so we know the different types of messages, but how does the body actually, write them? The process for crafting and sending these signals is just remarkably precise. For peptide hormones, it's this really cool three-step process, almost like drafting and sending an official memo. First, the cell makes this long, inactive prohormone. Think of it as the rough draft. It has the core message, but it's not ready to go. Next, specific enzymes act like little editors, precisely cutting out all the unnecessary parts to create the final active hormone. Only then is this polished, final message released from the cell. Now, you might think the body just releases a nice, steady stream of hormones, right? Nope. The reality is so much more sophisticated. Many of them are released in these rhythmic pulses or bursts. And this means the pattern of the signal, the timing, the frequency, can carry just as much information as the hormone itself. It's really not just what you say, it's how you say it. Okay, the message is sent. Now it has to navigate the body's superhighway, the bloodstream. And believe me, this journey is far from simple. How a hormone travels actually determines whether it can even complete its mission. This is especially true for steroid hormones. I mean, just look at this. You'd think all the hormone in your blood is doing something, but it's not. A staggering 99% of it is bound to carrier proteins, which makes it totally inactive. It's just a reserve. It's only that tiny, free 1% that's actually biologically active and able to get the job done. Almost all of it is just sitting on the bench, waiting to be called into the game. So these carrier proteins, they're not just taxis. They're more like bodyguards and managers all rolled into one. They create a huge reservoir, they protect the hormone from breaking down too quickly, and most critically, they give the body this amazing extra layer of control. By managing the managers, the body can fine-tune exactly how much active hormone is available at any given moment. It's brilliant.
So, our message has been created, it's been sent, and it has traveled all the way to its destination. Now for the main event. How does it actually deliver its instructions to the target cell? This is where the message is finally read. And we're right back to that crucial split we talked about. The water-soluble hormones, they bind to the outside of the cell. It's kind of like a runner in a relay race, handing off the baton. The message is passed along inside. But the hydrophobic hormones like steroids? Oh no, they don't hand off the message. They walk right into the cell's command center, the nucleus, and directly alter the genetic blueprint, telling genes when to turn on or off. One changes the cell's immediate activity, the other literally rewrites its instructions. So, the message is delivered, the job gets done. But how does the system know when to stop? How does it avoid sending way too many signals and throwing everything off? Well, this is the final and maybe the most brilliant part of the entire system, the feedback loop. It's the message received confirmation that keeps everything perfectly in check.
Now, there are two kinds. You've got positive feedback, which is pretty rare. It amplifies a signal to push towards some big finale like during childbirth. But the absolute cornerstone of endocrine control, the system's default setting, is negative feedback. This is a mechanism that actually dampens or shuts off the original signal. It's the body's thermostat, constantly working to maintain that perfect, steady state of balance.
Here's a classic example, and it's super simple when you break it down. The pituitary gland tells the thyroid to get to work. The thyroid does its job and releases its hormone into the blood. Now, once the pituitary senses that there's enough of that hormone circulating around, it just stops sending the work signal. It's this beautiful, self-regulating loop. The final product effectively turns off its own on switch, making sure everything stays in perfect balance. You know, when you step back and look at the whole thing, this incredible network of messengers, signals, and feedback loops, it's a true masterclass in biological engineering, and it's all designed for one thing: balance. It makes you realize just how delicate this system is, which really leads to the final critical question. In a network this precise, what happens when just a single message goes wrong? Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are talking about a part of your brain that's, get this, about the size of an almond. But don't let its size fool you. This tiny region is the absolute master controller of your entire internal world. It's small, yeah, but it is so, so mighty. And today we're going to pull back the curtain and see exactly how it runs the whole show. I mean, really think about it. That feeling when you just have to get a glass of water, it feels so simple, doesn't it? But what's really happening is you're getting a direct, high-priority command from an incredibly sophisticated control center that is constantly, and I mean constantly, monitoring everything going on inside you. And, yep, you guessed it, that control center is the hypothalamus. So here's our game plan for today. First, we're going to properly meet this control center. Then, we'll dive into its super important relationship with its right-hand man, the pituitary gland. We'll check out the different ways it sends out its messages, and then we'll tie it all together to see why this little structure is so critical for, well, pretty much everything you do. Okay, let's jump right in. The best way to think about the hypothalamus, it's the CEO of your body. Seriously, its number one job is to make sure the entire company, all your internal systems, are running smoothly and in perfect harmony. Its whole mission really boils down to one key idea: homeostasis. It sounds complicated, but it just means keeping your internal environment stable and balanced. You're too hot, it cools you down. Too cold, it warms you up. Dehydrated, it makes you thirsty. The hypothalamus is the one that spots the problem and kicks off the solution. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Its job isn't just about physical stuff like temperature. It also partners up with the limbic system, that's your brain's emotional hub, to help manage things like our instincts and our feelings. So it's not just a thermostat, you know? It's deeply connected to how we feel and why we act the way we do. So how does this CEO actually send out its memos to the rest of the body? Well, it does it through its crucial partnership with the pituitary gland. And what's wild is that the pituitary isn't just one gland, it's two. And the hypothalamus talks to each one in a completely different way. And you can see the two systems right here. On one side, you have the posterior pituitary. This thing is basically a piece of the brain that's just extended downwards. Think of it like a direct phone line. Nerve fibers run straight from the hypothalamus right into it. Easy. But the anterior pituitary? Totally different story. It actually grew up from the roof of your throat when you were developing, and it's connected by a special network of blood vessels. This isn't a phone line. This is more like a super exclusive courier service.
And this courier service is just incredible. It's what's known as a portal system. All that means is it's a closed loop of tiny little blood vessels that picks up hormones directly from the hypothalamus and drops them off right at the anterior pituitary's doorstep. The message doesn't have to travel through your whole body first. It's a private, highly efficient delivery route for chemical commands.
Okay, so now let's focus on that direct phone line. What kinds of messages is the hypothalamus sending through this direct neural link to the posterior pituitary?
The whole process is just so elegant. Check it out. First, the hormones are actually made up in the hypothalamus itself. Then they get sent down those long nerve fibers. They're then stored at the very ends of those nerves inside the posterior pituitary, kind of like packages waiting at a loading dock. And finally, when the hypothalamus sends the electrical signal, boom, they get released right into your bloodstream to do their job. And who are the star players on this direct line? Two absolute heavy hitters. First up, you've got vasopressin, which you might also know as ADH or antidiuretic hormone. Its whole purpose is to tell your kidneys to hang on to water. It's a huge part of managing hydration. The other one is oxytocin, which you've probably heard of, and it has major roles to play with the uterus and in lactation.
All right, let's switch gears and talk about that other system now. This is the more complex relationship with the anterior pituitary, the one that gets its orders not from nerves, but through that special blood delivery service we mentioned. So to talk to the anterior pituitary, the hypothalamus sends out these special messengers called hypophysiotropic hormones. They're basically little instruction notes. Some are releasing hormones, which are like a green light telling the anterior pituitary, go, release your hormone. Others are inhibiting hormones, which are a red light saying stop, hold back for now.
Now, don't get overwhelmed by all the names on this table. Just look at the pattern here, because it shows you how incredibly precise this system is. For every major function, stress, metabolism, growth, reproduction, the hypothalamus has a specific go signal, and sometimes a specific stop signal. It's not just yelling orders into the void, it's sending a very specific memo to a very specific department. It's a perfect chain of command.
So we've gotten into the mechanics, right? The phone lines, the courier systems. But let's zoom back out for a second. Why does any of this actually matter to you in your day-to-day life?
Let's circle all the way back to where we started, that feeling of being thirsty. It's not just your body saying, hey, I'm low on water. No, it's way cooler than that. When you get dehydrated, it kicks off a chain reaction called the renin-angiotensin system, which sends a very specific chemical signal directly to your hypothalamus. Your hypothalamus receives this message and goes, aha, I know what to do. It then makes you feel thirsty, while at the same time releasing vasopressin to tell your kidneys to save every drop of water they can. It's this beautiful, perfectly coordinated response. So when you really put it all together, you see that the hypothalamus is the ultimate master integrator. It's the central hub that's keeping your body's chemistry and your temperature perfectly balanced. It's the puppet master of your entire hormonal system. It drives fundamental behaviors like thirst, and it even plugs into your emotions and instincts. It does it all. So the next time you feel thirsty, or you shiver because you're cold, or even feel a sudden wave of emotion, just take a second to appreciate that tiny, unseen CEO deep in your brain that is working 24/7 to keep you and your entire internal world in perfect balance.
Welcome to The Explainer. We're going to journey deep inside the brain today to uncover this tiny, hidden command center that's, it's secretly running almost everything in your body. All right, let's just dive right in. So, let me ask you something. What if I told you there's a gland no bigger than a pea sitting right at the base of your brain? And that's the master controller for your growth, your metabolism, so much more. I know, it sounds a little like science fiction, doesn't it? But it's a fundamental part of who you are. And there's your answer. It's the pituitary gland. We're calling it the body's mission control, and for good reason. Because this tiny but mighty structure is pretty much the central hub sending out all the critical orders to your entire system. Okay, so its formal name is the pituitary gland. And it's so important that your body actually protects it in its own little bony pocket at the base of the skull. Now, from this super safe spot, it acts as the main coordinating center for a huge network of other hormone-producing glands. So, to put it simply, it's not just a gland, it's the boss of other glands. Now, mission control is basically split into two main departments, and they have very different jobs. You can think of the anterior pituitary as the factory floor. It actually makes and sends out its own hormones. The posterior pituitary, on the other hand, is more like a warehouse. It doesn't produce a thing. It just stores and releases hormones that are made a little higher up in the hypothalamus.
So while both parts are absolutely critical, that factory floor, the anterior pituitary, is where a ton of the action happens. It's home to 5 specialized teams of cells, and each one is busy creating and shipping out a very specific hormonal product.
And here's a look at that cellular dream team. As you can see, these cells handle just about everything, from your stress response to reproduction. But the team we're going to focus on today, the one that makes up almost half the gland's workforce, they're called the somatropes. And what's their star product? You guessed it, growth hormone. Okay, so let's zoom in on this star player. Growth hormone, or GH as we'll call it, doesn't just have one simple task. No way. It has this massive body-wide mission with 2 main directives that affect pretty much every part of you. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. A single molecule of growth hormone has an incredibly short life. I mean, once it's released into your bloodstream, it's got maybe 6 to 20 minutes to get its job done before it's gone, just metabolized. So you can imagine, its actions have to be really, really fast and incredibly powerful. So its first mission is pretty straightforward. Build the body. GH is what's called a protein anabolic hormone, which is just a fancy way of saying it tells your body to build tissues, not break them down. It's literally commanding your system to increase lean body mass, burn more body fat, and even absorb more calcium from your food. It is the architect and the construction crew for your entire body. Now, its second mission is all about energy management. GH tells your liver to release more sugar into the blood, and it frees up fat from your stores, giving you this quick source of fuel whenever you're stressed or haven't eaten in a while. And this creates a really interesting paradox. On one hand, it raises your blood sugar, which kind of works against insulin. But on the other hand, it actually helps the pancreas get ready to respond to other signals. It's a master coordinator for your body's whole energy budget. Okay, so like any good mission commander, growth hormone doesn't go it alone. To actually carry out its orders all across the body, it has to rely on this really cool activation sequence and a whole team of secret helpers, kind of like field agents, to get the job done right. So how does GH actually give a cell its orders? Well, think of it like a secret handshake. The hormone arrives and it binds to one receptor on the cell's surface. That binding changes the receptor's shape, which then attracts a second receptor to come over. When those two join up, a process called dimerization, it's like the handshake is complete. And that is the trigger. It kicks off a whole cascade of signals inside the cell, waking up all its machinery to follow GH's commands. And who are these secret helpers? They're called somatomedins. These are growth factors, and they're mostly made in the liver when growth hormone tells it to. And in a lot of cases, it's actually these somatomedins, not GH directly, that carry out the actual growth-promoting stuff on your tissues. So GH gives the order, but the somatomedins are the ones executing the mission on the ground. The 2 main players on this team are IGF-1 and IGF-2, and they've got a really clear division of labor. IGF-1 is the one that gets going because of growth hormone, but only after you're born. It's the key player in your childhood growth and puberty. IGF-2, on the other hand, pretty much works on its own, independently of growth hormone, and it does its most important work before you're even born, guiding fetal growth. So, we've seen how this whole intricate system is supposed to work, but what happens when mission control goes haywire? What if it starts sending out way too many orders? Well, the results are dramatic, and it all depends on one crucial factor: when it happens. You see, the difference between these 2 conditions is all about timing. If you have too much growth hormone as a kid, before your bone growth plates have sealed shut, the result is gigantism, a really dramatic increase in height. But if that same exact excess happens in an adult, your long bones can't get any longer, so the body starts to grow outward instead. That's a condition called acromegaly, and it leads to deformities and enlarged organs. It's the same signal, just at a different time, with a profoundly different outcome. But regardless of which condition it is, the core effect is the same. As the source material puts it so perfectly, the protein content of the body is increased and the fat content is decreased.
Basically, an excess of GH sends that build and strengthen mission into a dangerous overdrive, and it fundamentally changes the entire composition of your body.
So, we've seen the incredible power that's packed inside this one pea-sized gland. The power to build, to manage energy, to literally shape the human form. And that leaves us with a final, really fascinating question to think about. If this tiny gland is truly the body's master controller, what happens when we finally learn to precisely pull its levers? What possibilities and what new challenges could be waiting for us?
All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep into one of the most powerful and honestly most overlooked parts of your body. We're talking about the master regulator that's kind of hiding in plain sight.
You know, have you ever had those days where you just feel totally sluggish and cold, and then other days where you're buzzing with energy, maybe even feeling a little too warm? What's the deal with that? What's controlling your internal thermostat, that metabolic engine? Well, the answer is actually a thing. It's a small butterfly-shaped gland right at the base of your neck. And as we're about to see, its job is absolutely massive. So let's meet the thyroid. Okay, so first things first, let's get a handle on the thyroid's main role. You really can think of it as the central command for your body's entire metabolic rate. At its most basic, the thyroid makes hormones that boss around nearly every single cell in your body, telling them exactly how much energy to burn. It's like it's constantly fine-tuning your metabolism to keep everything running, well, just right. And this right here shows you why that balance is so critical. If the thyroid is underactive, that's hypothyroidism, everything just slows to a crawl. You get that mental fog, physical sluggishness, you can't stand the cold. But if it's overactive, hyperthyroidism, the engine is redlining. That can lead to body wasting, nervousness, and way too much heat. It is a very delicate balancing act. So how in the world does the thyroid pull this off? Well, let's peek behind the curtain and go right inside the gland itself. It's time for a tour of the hormone factory. And it's an incredibly efficient assembly line. First, it gathers its raw material, iodide, by pulling it straight from your blood. Next, it prepares that iodide into some special building blocks. Then it assembles those blocks into the finished products, the famous hormones T4 and T3. And finally, it stores all these finished goods in this gel-like stuff called colloid, all ready to be shipped out. And speaking of storage, get this. The factory is so good at its job that it builds up this massive reservoir of hormones. It stores enough to keep your body running for up to 2 full months. You could literally have 0 new iodine in your diet for that long, and your body wouldn't even notice. That's just incredible foresight. Okay, so the hormones are made, they're sitting in storage. But how do they get from that factory in your neck to, I don't know, a cell in your big toe? This next part is all about the logistics: shipping, delivery, and activation. See, once they're released into your bloodstream, most of these hormones don't just wander around aimlessly. Nope, they latch on to special transport proteins, becoming bound. And while they're bound, they're inactive. Think of them like packages locked inside a delivery truck. It's only that small little free hormones, the ones that get unboxed, that are actually active and can hop out to deliver their message to your cells. And here's where the story takes a fascinating little plot twist. You'd think the thyroid makes all the active hormone, right? Wrong. Check this out. T3 is the more powerful, more active hormone of the two, but the thyroid gland itself only makes about 13% of it. A whopping 87% is actually created out in the rest of the body, where your tissues convert the less active T4 into the powerhouse T3. So the thyroid ships out the potential, and your body activates it as needed. How cool is that? So this brings us to the grand finale of the hormone's journey. The active T3 hormone has arrived at its destination cell. Now what? Well, it's time to do its job. Flip the metabolic switch. The free T3 molecule slips right inside the cell, travels all the way into the nucleus, which is like the cell's command center, and it binds to a specific receptor. This whole complex then acts like a key turning a lock. literally turning on or turning off certain genes in your DNA. This is the fundamental action that tells the cell, hey, speed up, or okay, time to slow down.
So we have this incredibly powerful system, but how does the body control it? I mean, how does the thyroid even know when to work harder or when to just take a break? Well, it all comes down to this really elegant chain of command.
It all starts up in your brain. The hypothalamus, which is kind of like the CEO of this whole operation, senses that hormone levels are getting a little low. So it sends out a chemical memo called TRH.
That memo travels down to the pituitary gland, which you can think of as the general manager. The pituitary reads the memo from the CEO and sends out a very specific work order to the factory floor. That order is a hormone called TSH, which stands for thyroid stimulating hormone. That TSH work order travels through the blood right to the thyroid, and as soon as the thyroid gets its orders, it ramps up production and releases its T4 and T3 hormones into the bloodstream. And just like that, hormone levels start to come back to normal. It's a perfect top-down system. But wait a minute, what's to stop the hypothalamus and pituitary from just sending out work orders forever and ever, pushing you into hyperthyroidism? That's a great question. The answer is just a beautiful piece of biological engineering, something called a negative feedback loop. It's so smart. When the levels of T4 and T3 in the blood get high enough, the hormones themselves act as the off switch. They travel back up to the pituitary and the hypothalamus and basically tell them, hey, we've got plenty. You can stop sending TSH now. This shuts the whole system down until levels fall again. It's your body's own perfect thermostat. And that really brings us to this powerful idea. While technically you can live without a thyroid gland, you can't live a normal life without its proper function. Its influence on our energy, our mental state, our physical health, it's just too profound. So as we wrap up, just take a moment to appreciate this. This silent factory, this complex delivery system, this incredible chain of command. It's all happening inside of you right now, keeping your engine running at the perfect speed. How amazing is that? Thanks for joining us on The Explainer. All right, today we're going to dive deep into one of the most powerful and honestly dynamic parts of your body. We're talking about a true command center for stress, for metabolism, really for survival itself. I mean, have you ever really thought about it? What's going on inside you when you have to slam on the brakes to avoid an accident? And what's managing the slow burn of a really tough week at work? They feel totally different, right? But the source, well, it's actually the same. And the answer lies right here in the adrenal gland. But here's the catch. It's not just one thing. It's basically two completely different endocrine organs that fuse together. You've got this inner core and an outer layer, and each one has a totally different job. So let's start from the inside and work our way out. We're going to begin with the core of the gland. This is the adrenal medulla, and you can really think of it as your body's first responder. It's like an internal ER. Now, you can see here, the medulla makes up less than a third of the gland's total mass, but don't let that fool you. Its impact is immediate, and it is dramatic. Its whole job is to pump out a group of hormones we call catecholamines. And you've definitely heard of these, especially adrenaline, right? Catecholamines are basically the chemical messengers that are screaming, go, now throughout your entire body. They're what gets you ready for intense, immediate physical action. That classic fight or flight response. But here's the cool part. It isn't just a blunt instrument. It's this incredibly coordinated effort. Epinephrine, or adrenaline, opens up the floodgates, dilating blood vessels to your muscles and liver to give them a huge surge of fuel. At the exact same time, norepinephrine clamps down on blood flow to places that are less critical, like your digestive system. It's an amazing feat of resource management, and it all happens in a split second. And just as quickly as it all starts, it's designed to fade away. 2 minutes. That's about the half-life of these catecholamines in your blood. So this system is built for short bursts. It's designed to get you out of danger, and then it gets out of the way. Okay, now for the outer layer. If the medulla is the emergency room, then the adrenal cortex, well, it's more like the hospital's long-term planning committee. It's not dealing with the immediate crisis. Its job is to manage your resources for the long haul.
And the cortex itself is organized into 3 distinct zones, and each one produces a different class of steroid hormones. You've got the outer zone, which makes aldosterone for salt and water balance. Then the middle zone makes cortisol, which is all about metabolism. And the inner zone makes androgens, sex hormones.
Now, of all of these, cortisol is the one we really need to focus on when we talk about long-term stress. While adrenaline is handling that moment of sheer panic, cortisol is the one managing the sustained challenges. It taps into your body's energy reserves, it dials down inflammation, and it actually changes your metabolism to help you endure stress over hours, or days, or even weeks.
And you can really see the difference in their jobs when you look at their half-life. See? Epinephrine, gone in a flash, about 2 minutes. Aldosterone, which helps regulate hydration, sticks around a little longer. But look at cortisol. It circulates for over an hour. That tells you its role isn't about the split-second decision. It's about creating a whole new, stable state for your body to operate in while it's under pressure.
So, with such powerful hormones in play, you have to ask, how does the body keep them from just, running wild? It all comes down to this beautifully precise system of checks and balances.
For cortisol, it's regulated by this really elegant negative feedback loop. Think of it like a thermostat for your body. The pituitary gland in your brain tells the adrenal cortex, hey, release some cortisol. Then, once the levels in your blood get high enough, that cortisol itself sends a signal back to the brain that says, okay, that's enough, you can turn the command off now. It's this amazing self-regulating system.
And get this, it's not just for stress. Your body uses this system every single day. Cortisol levels naturally peak between about 4 and 10 in the morning. That morning surge is what helps wake you up. It raises your blood sugar and gets your metabolism fired up for the day ahead. And then it gradually tapers off, hitting its lowest point in the evening to help you wind down. This balance is absolutely critical, because when this carefully calibrated system gets thrown way off, specifically when there's way too much cortisol for way too long, the consequences, well, they can be really severe. This condition is known as Cushing syndrome. It's basically the clinical picture of what happens when that long-term strategist, the adrenal cortex, goes into complete overdrive and just doesn't shut off.
And the effects are profound, because cortisol has its hands in everything. It actually breaks down protein, which leads to thin skin and really weak muscles. It also tells the body where to store fat, causing it to pile up in the face, the abdomen, and the upper back, while the arms and legs can get really thin. It just vividly shows you that cortisol isn't just some stress hormone. It's a master regulator of your body's entire structure and metabolism.
So as we wrap this up, let's circle back to that central idea. The adrenal gland, it isn't one thing. It's a partnership. It really is a tale of 2 glands working together. It's really this simple. You have the fast-acting medulla for that immediate crisis, the flight or fight, and then you have the slow strategic cortex to make sure you have the resources to actually survive that stress. One gives you that burst of speed to escape danger, the other makes sure you can recover and carry on afterward.
And that leaves us with one last thought. From your sleep schedule to your diet to how you manage chronic stress day in and day out, your adrenal glands are constantly responding to all of it. So the question is, how are our modern lives affecting this ancient, powerful system that was designed for our survival? All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on your body's internal command center for a mineral that, let's be honest, you probably think you know, but it's about so much more than just strong bones. It's about the very spark of life itself. And yeah, you probably guessed it, it's calcium. But its role is way more dramatic, way more critical than you might imagine. We're not just talking about a building block here, this is a high-stakes signaling molecule. So, picture this. All the calcium in your body, an absolutely staggering 99% of it, is locked away inside your skeleton. It's basically a massive, well-guarded reservoir that gives you your structure and your strength. But here's the kicker. It's that other 1%, that tiny fraction that's free-floating in your blood. Well, that's the bit that's actually keeping you alive. This is the superstar. It's the spark plug you need for everything, from firing a nerve signal to making a muscle contract. So what happens if that delicate balance fails? If that tiny 1% drops too low? The results are, well, pretty severe. Your nerves and muscles become dangerously overexcited, leading to a condition called hypocalcemic tetany. We're talking muscle spasms so intense they can actually block your airway. And that is exactly why your body has this incredibly elegant control system. Okay, so let's dive into that system. It's time to meet the 3 key hormones that act like a super sophisticated thermostat for your body's calcium, making sure that life-sustaining 1% never, ever goes out of range. All right, so you've got two main players here, and you can think of them as having totally opposite but perfectly complementary jobs. Parathyroid hormone, or PTH, its whole mission is to get more calcium into the blood. Calcitonin, on the other hand, does the exact opposite. It works to lower calcium when levels creep up too high. But they don't work alone. They have this absolutely critical ally, an activated form of vitamin D called calcitriol. And get this isn't just some vitamin you get from your food. It's a super potent hormone that your own body manufactures to turbocharge its ability to absorb calcium from your diet. So, what happens when the system faces a crisis? Let's imagine a scenario. Your blood calcium levels start to plummet. How does the body react to pull things back from the brink? Well, an alarm goes off, and it sounds in these 4 tiny little glands that are tucked away in your neck, called the parathyroids. They are the primary sensors, and their job, 24/7, is to monitor the level of calcium flowing through your blood. And literally the second, they sense that drop, they kick off this immediate coordinated hormonal response. It's this beautifully simple and genius feedback loop designed for one thing: rapid correction. So once PTH is in the bloodstream, it's like a general issuing a 3-pronged attack order, all at the same time. First, it commands the bones: release your calcium. Second, it tells the kidneys: stop letting calcium escape in the urine. And third, it gives the kidneys a second, super secret mission. And that command is to activate vitamin D. Now, this is where things get really fascinating, because that order is the final step in this incredible journey that actually starts with sunlight hitting your skin. That creates a precursor, the liver modifies it, and then finally, when PTH gives the signal, the kidneys make the final conversion into that powerful hormone, calcitriol. And you know what's so cool? The system is just as smart when it has to go the other way. If your calcium levels get too high, PTH production basically shuts down. And that allows its counterpart, calcitonin, to jump into action, telling the bones to stop releasing calcium and the kidneys to get rid of the excess. But hold on a second. Where is all this emergency calcium coming from? To get that, we really need to understand the vault itself. Because your skeleton is not some dead scaffold. It's a dynamic, living system. Seriously, your skeleton is in a constant state of flux. It's less like a static warehouse and more like a bustling city, right? With demolition crews and construction crews working around the clock. So let's meet that crew. On one side, you've got the osteoblasts. Think of them as the builders, laying down new bone. And on the other side, you have the osteoclasts. They're the demolition team, whose job it is to break down old bone and release its minerals back into your bloodstream. And this is not some slow glacial process. The rate of this turnover is just mind-blowing. In a typical adult, something like 18% of all the calcium in your bones gets swapped out every single year. This constant remodeling is what keeps your skeleton strong, but it also makes sure there's always a ready supply of calcium on demand. Okay, so when you put all of these pieces together, the hormones, the organs, these specialized cells, you start to see this perfect, self-regulating loop that maintains that critical 1%. It's this constant dance between all these parts that makes sure your blood calcium stays locked into that super narrow, life-sustaining range. It's a totally unconscious, completely automated masterpiece of biological engineering happening inside you right now. It's just a remarkable example of your body's hidden genius. A system that works tirelessly to keep you in perfect balance. So here's a final thought. In a modern world of indoor work and processed foods, are we still giving this ancient command center the basic fuel, the sunlight, and the dietary calcium it needs to keep that spark of life lit?
All right, today we're going to tell a story. And it's not just any story. It's the life story of the female reproductive system. We're going to follow it from its very first instruction, a single molecule, all the way through a journey that spans decades. It's a story of rhythm, preparation, and some pretty profound changes.
So, it all kicks off with our chromosomes, right? We've all heard about XX and XY, but it's so much more interesting than just a couple of letters. What's the real biological switch that gets this whole incredible story started?
To answer that, we have to start at the very, very beginning. I'm talking long before birth, deep in our genetic code. This is where the blueprint for the entire system gets drawn up.
Now get this, because it's one of the coolest facts in biology. Female is the biological default setting. Seriously,
If an embryo doesn't have a Y chromosome with its specific gene, called SRY, the developmental road it goes down is automatically female. It's the original blueprint. And you can see exactly how that blueprint gets built right here. Super early on, every single embryo has the same starting part, this primitive gonad. But in an embryo with two X chromosomes, the outer layer, the cortex, gets the signal to become an ovary. And without male hormones, the body's internal plumbing, these things called Mullerian ducts, just naturally develop into the uterus and fallopian tubes. So, after birth, the whole system just waits. It lies dormant for years. And then comes the next chapter, this huge awakening where everything switches on and the body transforms. We all know it as puberty. Puberty is basically the moment the entire system comes online. Those ovaries that have been quiet for like a decade, suddenly, boom, they get two massive new jobs. They have to start managing hormones and preparing the eggs that make reproduction a possibility.
And this whole awakening doesn't happen all at once. It's not like flipping a switch. It's a very predictable sequence of events. It usually starts with adrenal hormones, then breast development kicks in, then pubic hair, and the grand finale, about a year later, is menarche, the first period. And what's really interesting is that for a while, those first cycles are often anovulatory. That just means no egg is actually released. The system is still, warming up.
So what's the trigger? What's the secret password that starts all this? Well, the command comes straight from the brain. The hypothalamus starts releasing a hormone called GnRH. But not just steadily. It does it in these rhythmic pulses. And that pulse is the master signal that wakes up the whole system. Okay, so the system's online. Now we get to the main job of the reproductive years, the menstrual cycle. And this isn't just one simple thing. It's this incredibly synchronized hormonal dance that prepares the body for a potential pregnancy, month in and month out.
The best way to wrap your head around the cycle is to think of it as two different stories happening at the same time, run by the same group of hormones. First, you've got the ovarian cycle. That's everything the ovary is doing to get an egg ready. And running right alongside it is the uterine cycle, which is how the uterus reacts to get a nice home ready for a possible embryo.
Let's look at the ovarian story. It's kind of like a three-act play. Act 1 is the follicular phase, where a follicle grows and pumps out a ton of estrogen. The climax of the play is ovulation, right around day 14, triggered by this huge surge of a hormone called LH that makes the follicle burst and release the egg. Then, in Act 3, the luteal phase, that leftover follicle transforms into something new called the corpus luteum, and it gets a new job as the main hormone producer.
Okay, so while all that drama is going down in the ovary, the uterus is basically getting a room ready for a guest. The estrogen from that growing follicle starts rebuilding the uterine lining. Then the progesterone from that new corpus luteum makes the lining all thick and cozy and ready for an embryo to implant. But if no guest shows up, no pregnancy, the hormone levels drop, the support is gone, and the lining is shed. And that is menstruation.
So if you want to boil it all down, here's the cheat sheet. The first half of the cycle, that's estrogen's world. It's all about building things up. The second half of the cycle is progesterone's territory. It's all about maintaining that environment and getting it ready. Two totally different hormonal worlds all in one cycle. So what happens when all of this monthly preparation actually meets its goal? Let's talk about the next chapter, pregnancy. This is the main event the whole system has been designed for.
Now just look at this number, 500. A female fetus starts out with over 7 million potential eggs. By the time puberty hits, it's down to around 300,000. And out of all of those, only about 500 will ever get their chance to be released. The odds are just absolutely wild.
So, remember that little progesterone factory, the corpus luteum? Normally, it's programmed to self-destruct after about 10 days, and that's what triggers a period. But if an egg gets fertilized and implants in the uterus, the whole script changes. The corpus luteum gets an urgent rescue signal that basically says, hold on, keep going. And that rescue signal is a hormone you've probably heard of, HCG. It's made by the brand new embryo, and it's basically the first message it sends to the mother's body. It's shouting, hey, I'm here, don't get rid of the uterine lining. And yep, this is the exact hormone that's detected in a pregnancy test. Now, the corpus luteum is the absolute hero of early pregnancy, but it can't carry that load forever. After about 6 to 8 weeks, there's a changing of the guard. The placenta is finally developed enough to take over as the main hormone factory, and it starts churning out the massive amounts of progesterone and estrogen needed to keep the pregnancy going.
But like any great story, this super complex, cyclical journey does have a final chapter. It's a totally natural program transition that signals the end of the reproductive years. It's called menopause.
So what actually causes it?
You might think it's something incredibly complicated, but the reason is surprisingly simple. The ovaries just run out of the follicles that kickstart the whole monthly cycle. No more follicles means no more eggs maturing, no ovulation, no corpus luteum, and no more cycle of hormones. The clockwork just runs out of parts.
And as those estrogen and progesterone levels drop, the body changes. The brain gets confused. It's not getting the hormonal feedback it expects. So it starts shouting louder, releasing way more follicle-stimulating hormone, or FSH, trying desperately to get the ovaries to respond. And it's this huge hormonal shift that can cause symptoms like hot flushes.
And that brings our whole story full circle. I mean, think about it. From a default genetic setting, to a sleeping system woken up by a pulse from the brain, to a monthly rhythm that runs for decades, and then a quiet, programmed end. It is an absolutely incredible system. It kind of makes you wonder, right? What other incredible biological clocks are ticking away inside all of us, perfectly timed, that we don't even notice until their rhythm changes for good?
Of one of the most incredible manufacturing plants in existence, the male reproductive system. Seriously, just think of it as a non-stop, high-tech factory that has one single, absolutely critical mission, and it's running on a very, very tight schedule. So let's start with just one number, 74. 74 days. That's a little under 2.5 months. Go ahead and lock that number in your brain, because it's the official lead time for one of the most amazing production cycles on the entire planet. So what is it? The answer is sperm. And get this, in a single milliliter of fluid, you can find 100 million of these incredibly complex cells, and every single one of them, from scratch, took the full 74 days to build. It's an absolutely mind-boggling feat of biological engineering when you stop and think about it. Okay. So to really get how this all works, it's helpful to imagine the whole system as one big facility. But it's running two major interconnected production lines 24/7. And these two lines have completely different jobs, but they're both absolutely vital. So production line number 1 is all about something called gametogenesis, which is really just a fancy way of saying building sperm. That's the assembly line. The second production line is the hormone factory, and its main job is to crank out androgens, the most famous of which is, of course, testosterone. And the key thing to remember is that these two production lines are constantly talking to each other.
All right, so let's zoom in on that first production line. We're going to go deep inside the factory, down into these microscopic tubes to follow the incredible journey of just one sperm cell, all the way from a basic little blueprint to a super high-tech vehicle built to deliver DNA. Now, this assembly line isn't just a big chaotic mess. No way. It's meticulously managed by these amazing cells called Sertoli cells. The best way to think of them is as nanny cells. I mean, they create the perfect protected little bubble, and they provide all the food and support the developing sperm need to survive that long 74-day journey to maturity. And get this, these nanny cells also act as a high security force. They actually lock their arms together to form a literal wall. It's called the blood testis barrier. So why do they need a wall? Well, it's because developing sperm are genetically different from the rest of the body's cells. And without this barrier, the body's own immune system would see them as foreign invaders and attack. It's a VIP-only zone, for sure. So, that 74-day marathon is broken down into 4 main stages. It all kicks off with a basic blueprint cell, the spermatogonia. This cell then divides and changes, eventually becoming what's called a spermatid. And here's the crucial part. It now has only half the original chromosomes. Finally, this cell goes through this dramatic makeover, getting its iconic tail and shape, becoming a fully fledged spermatozoon, ready for its mission. Now, you can probably guess that this whole assembly line is incredibly sensitive. For any of this to work, the conditions have to be just right. We're talking about a temperature that's a few degrees cooler than the rest of the body, total protection from the immune system, and this constant stream of hormonal messages from the brain telling those nanny cells exactly what to do and when to do it. Okay, time to check out the factory's second production line. If making sperm is the assembly line, then this is the power plant. It's cranking out the master hormone, testosterone, which doesn't just help with sperm production, it has effects all over the entire body. The heavy lifting here is done by a totally different crew of cells. They're called Leydig cells, and they're kind of tucked away in the spaces between the sperm-producing tubes. Think of them as the factory workers whose only job is to take cholesterol and, on command, transform it into testosterone and ship it out into the bloodstream. But here's the twist. Testosterone doesn't always work by itself. In some parts of the body, like your skin and prostate, it gets converted into an even more powerful version called DHT.
And these two have very different job descriptions. While testosterone is busy with things like muscle mass and sex drive, DHT is the one that drives facial hair growth, and kind of surprisingly, it's also the main hormone responsible for male pattern baldness. So with all of this complex activity going on, you have to ask, who's in charge here? Who's telling the factory when to speed things up or slow things down? Well, that would be the main command center, or HQ, located way up in the brain, specifically in the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. So how does management work? It's all done through these really elegant feedback loops. Here's how it goes. When the brain senses that testosterone levels are getting a little low, the pituitary gland sends out a chemical memo. It's a hormone called luteinizing hormone, or just LH for short. This LH signal then travels all the way through the bloodstream down to the testes, where it delivers a direct order to the Leydig cells on the factory floor. The message is simple: ramp up production. We need more testosterone now. Then, as the testosterone levels in the blood start to rise, the hormone itself sends a message back up to the brain. It's basically telling HQ, okay, we're good, we have enough for now, you can ease off. This makes the brain slow down the LH signal, which in turn tells the factory to slow down production. It's like a perfect self-regulating thermostat. And guess what? A nearly identical communication loop is happening to manage the sperm assembly line. The brain sends out a different hormone, FSH, to talk to the Sertoli nanny cells. And in response, the nanny cells send back their own hormone, called inhibin, which is their way of reporting back to HQ that everything's running smoothly and no more FSH is needed at the moment. So after that 74-day production cycle, and with all the hormone levels being perfectly managed by the brain, the final product is now completely assembled. It's ready to be packaged up and prepared for its final and most critical journey. Now, the final package isn't just sperm. It's actually a complex fluid called semen, and it's a cocktail mixed together from a few different glands. You've got the seminal vesicles adding fructose, which is basically an energy drink for the sperm. Then the prostate gland adds an alkaline fluid, which is crucial for neutralizing the acidic environment of the female reproductive tract. It gives the sperm a real fighting chance. And what about the delivery itself? Well, it's a two-part reflex that originates in the spinal cord. Step one is called emission. This is where smooth muscles contract to load the semen into the urethra. That's immediately followed by step two, ejaculation, where a different set of muscles contract powerfully to propel the semen outward. You know, when you take a step back and you look at all these moving parts working together, the specialized cells, the security barriers, the constant chemical chatter between the testes and the brain, it's just impossible not to be amazed. It truly is a self-regulating, incredibly efficient masterpiece of engineering. And all of this leaves us with one last thought. The incredible elegance of this system is matched only by how sensitive it is. And given its super precise needs for things like temperature and hormonal balance, it really makes you wonder, just how fragile is this intricate factory when faced with all the pressures of our modern world?
All right, let's talk about one of the most important and honestly most underrated organs in your entire body. It's this quiet hero working 24/7, managing your body's entire fuel supply. Yep, we're talking about the pancreas. So let's start with something we can all relate to. Picture this. You eat a donut, or maybe a bagel, a bowl of pasta. Whatever it is, your body suddenly gets hit with this huge rush of sugar. So what happens then? How does your body possibly handle that massive spike and get back to normal? Well, the whole thing is an incredibly delicate balancing act. It's like walking a tightrope. Your body needs just the right amount of sugar, or glucose, in your blood all the time. Too much, and it's toxic. Too little, and your cells are literally starving. And the ringmaster of this whole circus? The pancreas. So here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to dig into that energy challenge our bodies face every single day. Then, we'll properly meet the pancreas and its star players: insulin, the gatekeeper, and glucagon, the backup fuel. And finally, we'll see what happens when that crucial balance is lost. You know, every time you eat, your body is faced with this same fundamental problem. As you digest your food, it gets broken down into glucose, and that glucose just floods into your bloodstream. It's a massive influx of fuel, and your body needs a really sophisticated system to use it and store it without getting totally overwhelmed.
And this is where the pancreas shines. I mean, sure, it helps with digestion, but its real magic is in these tiny, specialized clusters of cells called the islets of Langerhans. You can think of these islets as the command center for your body's energy, constantly tasting the blood to check sugar levels and sending out hormones to keep everything perfectly in check.
And if you look at what these little command centers are made of, you get a huge clue about what's most important. A whopping 70% of the cells in these islets are B cells, or beta cells. That massive number tells you they have a really critical job. Another 20% are A cells, and the last little bit are D and F cells.
Okay, so each of these cell types has a mission. Those B cells, the ones that make up the vast majority, they pump out insulin, the famous hormone that brings blood sugar down. And the A cells, they release glucagon, which does the exact opposite. It brings blood sugar up. The other guys help out, but for our story, the two main characters, the real superstars, are insulin and glucagon.
So, back to that donut. Your blood sugar starts to climb, and those B cells just spring into action. They release insulin, and insulin acts like a key, or maybe a bouncer at a club. Its message to the rest of your body is crystal clear. Hey, we've got a ton of fuel here. Time to open the doors and store it away. The way it's made is like a tiny, super efficient assembly line inside the cell. First, it's built in a place called the endoplasmic reticulum. Then it gets all packaged up into these neat little bubbles, or granules. Those granules then travel to the edge of the cell and, poof, they're released into the bloodstream to get to work. And get this, it works incredibly fast. The half-life of insulin, once it's in your blood, is only about 5 minutes. That's it. This speed is amazing because it shows just how responsive the system is. It can make these tiny, precise adjustments to your energy levels from 1 minute to the next.
So, what's on insulin's to-do list? Well, its main job is to tell your muscle and fat cells to open up and take in all that glucose from the blood. It also tells your liver and muscles to store that glucose for later, kind of like packing away groceries. It promotes fat storage, helps build protein, and, this is key, it slams the brakes on using fat for energy. Insulin is all about storing, building, and making sure not a single bit of that precious fuel goes to waste.
Okay, but what about the flip side? What happens a few hours later when you haven't eaten in a while and your blood sugar starts to dip a little too low? Well, that's the cue for the A cells. They step up and release insulin's opposite number, glucagon. And its message is the complete reverse. Emergency! We're low on fuel. Release the reserves.
And this right here is the heart of the whole system. It's this beautiful push and pull. Insulin sees high blood sugar and says store it, which brings levels down. Glucagon sees low blood sugar and says release it, which brings levels back up. It's this constant, elegant dance between the two that keeps our bodies humming along in perfect balance.
But what happens when this beautiful system breaks down? What if the body just can't make enough insulin? Or what if the cells just stop listening to insulin's signal? Well, that catastrophic failure is the root cause of diabetes. See, when there isn't enough insulin, those gates on the cells basically stay locked shut. So after a meal, the blood gets packed with all this glucose, but it's got nowhere to go. It just builds up and up and up in the bloodstream, reaching these really dangerous levels.
And here's the truly devastating part of the whole thing. While the blood is swimming in sugar, overflowing with fuel, the cells themselves, your muscles, your brain, they're completely starving because they can't get access to any of it.
The source material we're looking at uses this phrase that just hits you right in the gut. It calls diabetes starvation in the midst of plenty. And that just perfectly captures the cruel, twisted irony of the disease. All the energy you could ever need is right there, but the body is completely powerless to use it.
Because the cells are screaming for glucose, the body panics and switches to its emergency backup plan. It starts burning fat for energy at a crazy accelerated rate. But this isn't a good thing. This desperate switch causes a massive spike in things like free fatty acids and triglycerides in the blood, which creates a whole new storm of problems.
And over time, this toxic environment of high blood sugar and haywire fat metabolism just wreaks havoc. It destroys the tiny, delicate blood vessels in the eyes and kidneys. It hardens the big arteries, leading to strokes and heart attacks. And it damages nerves all over the body. The consequences of losing that delicate balance are just severe.
So this all leaves us with a really critical modern-day question. With our current lifestyles and diets, we're putting more strain on this system than ever before. So, understanding this incredible dance between insulin and glucagon isn't just a biology lesson. It's absolutely fundamental if we want to protect our most vital systems for the long haul. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
Have you ever really truly stopped to think about what happens after you eat? Because what's happening deep inside you right now, well, it's one of the most sophisticated, automated factories in the entire world. Let's get into it. Okay, so think about that last bite of food you took. Maybe it was just a few minutes ago. The second it passed your lips, it kicked off this incredible chain reaction, a process of mind-boggling complexity. And the craziest part? You don't have to think about it, you don't manage it, it just happens, right? So how does it all work? Well, for starters, it's not just food sliding down some simple tube. No, it's more like a journey through a super high-tech processing plant. This internal factory of yours mixes, sterilizes, and breaks down materials with incredible precision, using chemical messengers and its very own on-site brain to get the job done flawlessly.
Now, every factory tour has to start at the beginning, right? At the entrance. And for that bite of food, the journey begins at the welcoming committee, your mouth. This is where the raw materials first get checked in for some initial processing. We're going to follow that one bite of food on its entire journey. We'll see it go through the 3 main departments of this factory. First, the mouth, then onto the stomach, and finally into the intestine, which is where the most complex and amazing work really happens. So before you even swallow, the first responders are already on the scene. And get this, saliva is so much more than just water. It is packed with specialized tools. There's an enzyme in there called amylase that starts digesting starches immediately. It lubricates everything so it all goes down smoothly, and it's also your mouth's security team, using these powerful antibacterial agents to fight off germs right from the get-go. All right, from there, the food takes a plunge right into the factory's main processing vat, the stomach. This is where the really heavy-duty breakdown begins, inside this highly controlled and intensely acidic environment. You know, the stomach is a total master at multitasking. Its first job is just to be a storage tank, which is why you can eat a whole meal at once instead of, having to nibble all day long. And while it's holding onto the food, it's churning and mixing it into a pulp. But maybe its most important job is to sterilize everything, using incredibly powerful acid to kill any dangerous bacteria that might have snuck in. So how does it do all this? Well, the walls of your stomach are lined with these tiny little glands, and you gotta think of them like they're staffed by specialized workers right there on the factory floor. You've got your parietal cells. Those are the acid pumps. They also release something called intrinsic factor, which is absolutely critical for absorbing vitamin B12 later on. And then right next door, you have the chief cells, and they're pumping out enzymes to kickstart the digestion of proteins and fats. And look, when I say these parietal cells pump acid, I don't think you understand just how unbelievably powerful they are. They create a concentration of acid that is over 1,000,000 times stronger than the acid level in your blood. That's just wow. It's some serious chemical engineering happening on a scale you can't even imagine. Okay, but obviously these cells can't just be pumping out that much acid all the time, right? That would be a total disaster. They need orders. And that's where a hormone called gastrin comes in. When food hits the stomach, these little G cells release gastrin, and you can think of it as the on-site manager. It travels over to the parietal cells and basically shouts the order, "All right, people, food's on the floor, fire up the acid pumps." So after a few hours of that, our food, which is now more like an acidic sludge, gets sent out in these little controlled bursts, and it's headed for the final and honestly the most sophisticated part of the factory. Welcome to the finishing line, the small intestine. So this acidic gunk arrives from the stomach, and Houston, we have a problem. The small intestine is not built to handle that kind of acidity. It's a potential crisis on the factory floor. But don't worry, the factory has a protocol for this. The acid itself acts like an alarm bell. It triggers specialized cells in the intestine wall to release a chemical messenger, a hormone called secretin, into the blood. It's basically an SOS, an urgent call for backup. And this, right here, is where you see the genius of the whole system. Secretin travels to a nearby organ, the pancreas, and delivers its urgent message. The pancreas immediately responds by releasing a flood of bicarbonate fluid, which is pretty much nature's Tums, right, to completely neutralize that stomach acid. The environment is now safe for work to continue. Okay, but that's not all that's happening. At the very same time, something else is going on. The fats and the proteins that were in the food trigger the release of a second, totally different messenger. This one's called cholecystokinin, or just CCK for short. You can think of CCK as the production foreman, the one who calls in the heavy machinery. It sends out 2 critical commands at once. It tells the pancreas, hey, release your powerful digestive enzymes to break down all this food. And it signals the gallbladder to release bile, which is absolutely essential for digesting fats. So just look at this beautiful, elegant system you've got. Secretin is the safety manager, screaming, neutralize the acid now. And at the same time, CCK is the production manager, shouting, release the enzymes and digest the food. It's perfect. 2 different managers, shouting 2 different orders, triggered by 2 different problems, all working together in perfect harmony. Okay, so this is all incredibly complex, right? It makes you wonder, who's running the show? Who's in the main control room making sure all this stuff happens at exactly the right time? Well, it turns out the factory is managed by 3 different but totally interconnected systems. We've already met the endocrine system, that's the hormones like gastrin and CCK traveling through your blood like long-distance memos. There's also a paracrine system, which is kind of like cells just passing notes to their immediate neighbors for quick local messages. And then there's the third one, which honestly, this one is the most mind-blowing of all, a dedicated nervous system. I mean, literally woven into the walls of your gut, there's this massive, incredibly complex web of neurons called the enteric nervous system, or the ENS. It has something like 100 million neurons. To put that in perspective, that is as many neurons as you'd find in an entire spinal cord. It's huge. And the most incredible part, it runs almost completely on its own, without needing instructions from your actual brain. And that's exactly why scientists have a nickname for it. They call it the little brain. Your gut has its own intelligence. It can feel what's going on, it makes decisions, and it controls the whole show, from muscle contractions to chemical secretions, all on its own without you ever having to think about it. So, let's just step back for a second. When you put all of this together, the specialized cells, the chemical messengers, this on-site little brain, you realize we're not just talking about a factory anymore. We're talking about pure genius. I mean, that simple bite of food you took earlier, it gets processed by a system of just breathtaking elegance. It is a self-regulating, fully automated masterpiece. It uses a sophisticated chemical language and its very own brain to make sure everything you eat is broken down and used perfectly. It's this incredible, hidden world that is running flawlessly, right now, inside of you. It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? If your body is pulling off this level of genius just to digest your lunch, what other hidden masterpieces is it performing right now without you even having a clue? All right, let's dive deep into one of the most amazing processes happening inside you right now. We're going on the incredible journey of a meal. We're going to follow that food from the very first bite all the way to its final destination and uncover the mind-blowing chemistry that turns food into, well, you. I mean, really think about it. It's something we do every day and totally take for granted. You eat a sandwich, right? And then, a little while later, that sandwich is literally powering your brain, letting you move, letting you live. How in the world does that actually happen? How does your body crack open that food and pull out all the good stuff? That's exactly what we're going to figure out.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll meet the key players in what I like to call the digestive gauntlet. Then we're going to break down how we handled the big 3, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And finally, we'll see how they cross that finish line and actually get into our system.
Okay, so our journey starts in the gastrointestinal system. You can picture it as this long, winding arena, and any food that enters has to run a gauntlet, facing off against some seriously powerful chemical agents designed to just tear it apart piece by piece. To get this job done, our body has 3 main tools in its toolbox. First up, you've got hydrochloric acid down in the stomach. We're talking about a seriously harsh environment. Then you have enzymes. Think of these as tiny molecular scissors that snip apart big molecules. And they come from everywhere, your salivary glands, your stomach, your pancreas. And last but not least, we've got bile, which comes from the liver. This is our special weapon for dealing with fats. So let's kick things off with our first nutrient, carbohydrates. You know, from stuff like bread, pasta, fruit. This is the body's favorite source of quick energy. But here's the catch. Your body can't just use a big, complex starch molecule as is. It has to crack the code first. And this whole process starts the second you take a bite. There's an enzyme in your saliva called amylase that immediately starts snipping those long starch chains, the polysaccharides, into smaller bits. The job continues in the small intestine thanks to more amylase from the pancreas, creating these little intermediate chains. And then, for the final cut, enzymes right on the surface of your intestinal cells, they call it the brush border, finish the job, freeing up simple sugars like glucose that your body can finally absorb. So what happens if one of those little molecular scissors is missing? Well, that's pretty much exactly what lactose intolerance is. If you have it, you're missing lactase, which is one of those crucial final step enzymes on the brush border. Without it, the sugar in milk just can't get broken down or absorbed, and that's what causes all the trouble. It really shows you how important every single one of these little tools is. Okay, so once we've got these simple sugars, how do they actually get into our blood? Well, it turns out not all sugars use the same door. Glucose and galactose, they need a special escort. They have to grab on to a sodium ion to get through the door, and that takes energy. It's an active process. Fructose, on the other hand, it's kind of got a VIP pass. It gets its own private entrance that doesn't cost any energy at all. It's a passive process. So yeah, 2 different sugars, 2 totally different ways of getting in.
All right, next on the list, proteins. These are the building blocks for, well, pretty much everything. Your muscles, your enzymes, you name it. And breaking them down is a bit more heavy-duty than dealing with carbs. This whole operation starts in the stomach.
Hey, remember that hydrochloric acid we talked about? This is its time to shine. That super acidic environment flips a switch and activates a really powerful enzyme called pepsin. Pepsin is the first one in, and it just starts hacking away at those big, complex protein structures, chopping them up into smaller, more manageable chains called polypeptides. Now, this next part is it's beautiful. It's one of the most elegant systems in the whole body. Your pancreas sends a whole team of protein-busting enzymes into the small intestine, but they all arrive turned off, which is a good thing. You don't want them digesting the pancreas on the way. It all comes down to one little enzyme on the intestinal wall that acts like a master switch. It activates an enzyme called trypsin, and once trypsin is on, it just goes on a rampage, turning on all the other enzymes. It's this perfect, controlled chain reaction.
And the body is just so incredibly thorough. To make sure not a single protein fragment gets away, that final breakdown happens in 3 different places. It happens out in the main intestinal space, it happens right on the surface of the cells that do the absorbing, and for any little bits that manage to sneak through, the job even gets finished inside the cells themselves. It's like a triple check system just to be as efficient as possible.
Okay, we've dealt with carbs and proteins, which both dissolve in water. But now we get to the trickiest customer of all, fats. As we all know, fat and water do not mix, and our entire digestive system is a watery place. So our body needs a really clever solution for this problem. I mean, that's the fundamental question, right? You've seen this yourself a million times if you've ever looked at salad dressing. The oil and the vinegar just separate. So how does our body stop all the fat we eat from just clumping together into one giant, useless blob that we can't digest?
The answer is bile. Bile acids create these amazing little structures called micelles. And the best way to think of a micelle is as a tiny delivery taxi for fat. The outside of the taxi loves water, but the inside is all cozy and loves fat. This lets it package up all the little bits of broken down fat, drive them through the watery environment of the intestine, and drop them off right at the doorstep of our intestinal cells.
So what's riding inside these little taxis? All the passengers are the broken down pieces of fat. You've got fatty acids, monoglycerides, and other stuff like cholesterol, all bundled up inside, safe and sound for their trip to the intestinal wall.
But once they're dropped off, the story takes another weird turn. Inside the intestinal cell, all those fat pieces are put back together. They're reassembled and then packaged into a new, much larger particle called a chylomicron. Now, these guys are way too big to get into the tiny blood vessels, so instead, they take a different route. They enter the lymphatic system, which is kind of like a parallel highway system that runs alongside our bloodstream, to start their journey to the rest of the body.
So everything has been broken down into its smallest parts. We've reached the final frontier, absorption. And this is where we find some of the most surprising things about just how smart and efficient our gut really is.
Get ready for a fact that's probably going to blow your mind a little. Where does all the protein that your intestine digests actually come from? You'd think, from food, right? 100%. Nope. Only about half of it is from the food you eat. The other half actually comes from your own body. It's from all the protein-based digestive juices you secrete and from old intestinal cells that get shed and recycled. Your body is literally digesting and reusing itself all the time. Wild, isn't it? And that leads to another fascinating point. You see, while our digestive system is incredible, it isn't 100% perfect. Every now and then, tiny little bits of undigested protein can slip through the cracks. When that happens, our immune system can spot them and label them as foreign invaders. So the next time you eat that food, the immune system launches a defense, and boom, you've got an allergic reaction. That's the actual basis for how food allergies work.
And that just leaves us with this final, amazing thought. Your gut is not just a food processor. It's a sensory organ. It is constantly sampling the outside world that we're putting into our bodies, and it's making critical decisions about what's a friend and what's a foe. It just makes you wonder, what else is this incredible system learning about our environment, and how is it shaping our health in ways we are only just beginning to understand?
So when we think about our digestive system, it's easy to just picture a simple tube that food passes through.
But it's so much more than that. It's actually this incredibly complex, beautifully choreographed performance, a kind of dance that's happening inside you 24/7 without you ever having to think about it. So today, let's pull back the curtain on that incredible show.
We have all been there, right? You finish a meal and pretty soon the gurgling and the rumbling starts. But have you ever really stopped to think about what's going on down there? I mean, who or what is directing all of that traffic? It's definitely not just gravity pulling things down. It is a super sophisticated system of movement, a secret rhythm that our bodies have absolutely perfected over time.
Okay, so at the very heart of this entire performance are two fundamental dance moves that the gut uses to process literally everything we eat. You can think of them as the basic steps, right? The foundation for all the more complex routines. One move is all about pushing things forward, and the other is all about mixing things up. And these two moves, they have very different jobs. First up, you've got peristalsis. This is the propulsion wave. Basically, when the gut wall stretches from food, it triggers this wave of contraction that just pushes the food forward, always in one direction, downstream. Then you have segmentation, which is like the mixing churn. This is a series of back and forth contractions that, brilliantly, actually slows things down. It makes sure all the food gets thoroughly mixed with digestive juices so we can absorb all the good stuff. So one pushes, the other mixes. And you absolutely need both for this to work. Now, here's what's just fascinating about all this: how self-sufficient the gut is. Peristalsis is what's called an intrinsic property. That means it's run by the gut's own onboard computer, the enteric nervous system. It doesn't need the brain to tell it what to do. It's a localized automatic reflex. It's pretty amazing. So, if the gut has its own nervous system and can move on its own, what's setting the tempo? How does it coordinate everything so perfectly? Well, this brings us to the unseen conductor of the entire orchestra, a secret electrical system that dictates the pace of the gut's entire choreography. It's called the basic electrical rhythm, or BER, and you can think of it just like the heart's pacemaker, but for your gut. There are these specialized cells, they're called the interstitial cells of Cajal, that generate these slow, rhythmic electrical waves. Now, these waves don't always cause a contraction by themselves, but they set the rhythm. Contractions can only happen at the peak of the wave. This is the master beat that keeps the entire system in sync. And this rhythm isn't just one boring, monotonous beat. Oh no, the pace changes dramatically depending on where you are in the gut. In the stomach, it's a slow, steady, powerful grind at about 4 cycles per minute. But as soon as that food hits the beginning of the small intestine, the tempo just skyrockets to 12 cycles per minute for some really intense mixing. Then it slows way down again in the colon. Each part of the tract has the perfect beat for its specific job. Okay, so now that we know the basic moves and the rhythm that drives them, let's take a quick tour through the digestive tract and see the full performance in action, from top to bottom. First stop, the stomach. You know, its first job isn't to contract. It's actually to relax and expand, to make room for the food you just eat. That's called receptive relaxation. Then, guided by that slow BER of about 3 to 4 waves per minute, it begins these powerful peristaltic contractions. It's not just pushing, it's mixing, grinding, and churning your food into this liquid called chyme, which it then releases into the small intestine at a very careful, controlled rate. And how fast that happens? Well, it depends entirely on what you ate. You've probably felt this. Carbohydrates, they move through the stomach pretty quickly. Proteins take a little longer. And fats? Well, fats slow that process way down, which is exactly why a fatty meal can leave you feeling full for a lot longer. Next, we head into the small intestine, which is really the main stage for digestion and absorption. The pace here just explodes, with the BER hitting its peak of up to 12 cycles per minute. This fast rhythm is what drives all those segmentation contractions we talked about, constantly churning and mixing the chyme to make sure every last bit of nutrient can make contact with the intestinal wall and get absorbed into your body. Finally, we get to the colon. Its job is completely different. Think of it more like a reservoir. Here, motility slows right down. The goal isn't rapid mixing anymore. It's about giving the body time to absorb water and minerals. And it is incredibly efficient, turning over a liter of liquid into just about 250 milliliters of semi-solid feces. Then, a few times a day, it triggers these mass action contractions, these big, powerful squeezes to move everything along towards the exit. But the gut's performance isn't just about digesting your meals. It also runs a super tight ship. It's got special operations for housekeeping and even a full-blown emergency protocol for when something needs to get out fast.
So between meals, when your gut is empty, it's not just sitting around doing nothing. It kicks off something called the migrating motor complex, or MMC. And this is literally the gut's housekeeping crew. It's this powerful wave of contractions that sweeps all the way from the stomach through the small intestine, clearing out leftover debris, bacteria, any residue, just to get the place clean and ready for the next meal. You know that rumbling you hear when you're really hungry? That's often the MMC at work.
And this isn't random. The MMC runs on a really predictable cycle, repeating about every 100 minutes or so when you're fasting. It starts with a quiet phase, then moves into some irregular contractions, and finally culminates in this short but really intense burst of activity that pushes everything through. This whole cleaning cycle is kicked off by a hormone called motilin, and as soon as you eat, motilin is suppressed. It's like telling the housekeeping crew, okay, break's over, back to digestion. All right, now for the emergency protocol, vomiting. I know, it feels chaotic and awful, but it is anything but random. It's actually a highly coordinated, centrally regulated protective reflex. Its whole job is to get a potentially harmful substance out of your system as quickly and efficiently as possible.
The whole process is remarkably precise. It actually starts with a reverse peristalsis, pulling stuff from your small intestine back into the stomach. Instantly, your airway seals off to protect your lungs. Then your abs contract powerfully, squeezing the stomach just as your esophagus relaxes. And, well, you know the rest. It's this complex sequence, all perfectly orchestrated by a vomiting center in your brainstem.
So, when you put it all together, from the rhythmic waves of the BLER to the distinct dance moves of peristalsis and segmentation, and even these specialized routines for cleaning and for emergencies, the gut's choreography is just an astonishingly complex and elegant performance. It runs nonstop, perfectly adapting its rhythm and its movements to whatever the task is, all without us having to think about it for a single second.
Which, brings us to a final thought. This whole intricate system evolved over millennia. It has a natural, ancient rhythm. So the real question is, how does our modern lifestyle, our diets, our stress levels, our weird eating schedules, how does all that either support or disrupt this incredible internal choreography? It's definitely something to think about.
Today, we are taking a tour of one of the most incredible, complex, and absolutely vital piece of machinery you own, your liver. And I want you to forget thinking of it as just another organ. We're going to treat it for what it really is. The body's essential, non-stop factory. A biochemical powerhouse that processes every single thing you consume. So, here's our tour map. We'll start with why it's the body's unsung hero. Then check out its unique blueprint. We'll look at its job as the metabolism engine, its role in detox and defense, and its amazing bile export system. And finally, we'll see what happens when this incredible system starts to fail.
All right, first stop. Let's really get a handle on why the liver is the body's true unsung hero. It's the primary filter, the quality control center, and the main gatekeeper for your entire body.
And to really get a sense of its importance, just think about its size. The liver isn't just a major organ, it is the single largest gland in your body. And that scale, well, it's absolutely necessary for the thousands of biochemical jobs it's doing, even while you're fast asleep.
Now this right here, this is the key to its power. Imagine everything you eat and drink. Once it's broken down and absorbed, it doesn't just go everywhere. Nope, it has to take a mandatory trip through the liver first. This means the liver gets first dibs. It processes, sorts, stores, and changes everything before letting it out into your main circulation.
So, how is this factory even built to handle such a crazy demanding job? Let's head down to the factory floor and take a look at the liver's unique and incredibly efficient blueprint. Okay, get this. The liver's plumbing is totally unique. Unlike pretty much any other organ, it has a dual blood supply. You've got the hepatic artery, bringing in fresh, oxygen-rich blood from the heart, to keep the liver's own cells happy. But the real action comes from the portal vein. That's the one delivering all that nutrient-packed blood right from your gut, ready for processing.
And this is the processing line in action. Blood from both pipes mixes together and slowly trickles through this maze of tiny channels called sinusoids. This is not a race, it's a super meticulous filtration process that takes about 8 seconds. And along the way, you have on-site security, these specialized cells called Kupffer cells, just hanging out, grabbing any bacteria or junk. Only after all that cleaning and processing does the blood finally drain out to the rest of the body.
But here's the thing. The liver isn't just one big, solid mass. It's way smarter than that. It's more like a massive corporation made up of about 100,000 tiny individual business units. Each one of these is called an acinus, and it basically acts as its own little self-contained processing plant. This whole modular design is what makes the liver so incredibly efficient and so resilient. Okay, now let's see how that amazing structure supports one of the liver's main gigs, managing your body's entire energy portfolio. Think of the liver as your body's energy banker. After you eat a big meal, your blood sugar spikes, right? Well, the liver jumps in, pulls that extra glucose out of the blood, and puts it into savings. Then, a few hours later, between meals, when your blood sugar starts to dip, the liver makes a withdrawal, releasing that glucose back out to make sure your brain and muscles have a steady supply of fuel. That's the glucose buffer function. And it's not just about glucose. The liver is a master chemist for all our fuel types. It can build brand new glucose from scratch if you're fasting, it can burn fat for immediate energy, and it even packages up fats and cholesterol into lipoproteins to ship them around the body. It really is the central command for all of our energy logistics. Now, beyond just managing energy, your liver is your primary line of defense. It's the quality control department that neutralizes toxins, and it's the manufacturing plant for many of the body's most essential proteins. The liver's detox system is this really elegant two-step process. In phase 1, these special enzymes take the first crack at a toxin, changing its chemical structure. But sometimes that actually makes it more reactive. So that's where phase 2 comes in. Another molecule gets attached, which neutralizes a substance and, crucially, makes it water-soluble so it can be safely flushed out of the body in bile or urine. At the exact same time, the liver is a non-stop protein factory. I mean, it's synthesizing albumin to keep your blood pressure stable. It's creating the clotting factors that stop you from bleeding. And it's making the proteins that transport hormones all over. In fact, the liver makes almost every major protein in your blood, with one big exception: immunoglobulins. Your immune cells handle those. So, with all this filtering and manufacturing, how does the liver get rid of all the waste? And how does it help with digestion? Well, let's look at its super sophisticated export and waste management system, the production of bile. The output here is pretty staggering. Every single day, the liver's assembly lines crank out about 0.5 liter, that's roughly a pint, of this complex, greenish-yellow fluid. You can think of it as parts powerful digestive soap, part essential garbage truck. So where does that distinct color come from? It's actually from recycled blood. It's amazing. When old red blood cells are taken out of service, their breakdown creates this yellow waste product called bilirubin. The liver snags this toxic pigment from the blood, makes it water-soluble, and then dumps it into the bile. So bilirubin is literally what gives bile its color. And this is where the liver's little partner, the gallbladder, comes into play. Bile straight from the liver is about 97% water, but the gallbladder's job is to act like a storage tank and just absorb a lot of that water. This makes the bile super concentrated and way more potent for when you finally need it to digest a fatty meal. Okay, we've seen how incredible this factory is when everything is running smoothly. But to truly appreciate just how important it is, let's take a look at what happens when there's a major system failure. It's a question you might have wondered about. This really noticeable symptom, called jaundice, is one of the most direct and, frankly, visible signs that the liver's whole waste processing system is breaking down. So jaundice happens when the liver just can't properly process and get rid of that yellow pigment, bilirubin, that we just talked about. Instead of being flushed out in the bile, it backs up into the bloodstream and gets deposited in the skin and eyes, which causes that characteristic yellow color. And a failure can happen at any point on this biological assembly line. You know, maybe the body is just producing way too much bilirubin for even a healthy liver to handle. Or maybe the liver cells can't grab it from the blood, or they can't process it correctly. Or maybe the plumbing is just blocked and the processed bile simply has no way to get out. Another really devastating sign of severe liver disease is something called ascites. When the liver gets scarred and hardened, like in cirrhosis, blood can't flow through it easily anymore. The pressure starts to back up in that big portal vein, forcing liters and liters of fluid to leak out into the abdomen. It's a very physical sign that the entire circulatory blueprint of the organ has just broken down. From managing your energy supply to detoxifying waste, from building essential proteins to helping you digest your food, the liver is your silent, tireless partner in health. It never clocks out. It never takes a vacation. Seeing its complexity and its absolutely vital role, it really is an organ worthy of our deep appreciation and, most importantly, our care.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into the incredible team that works 24/7 inside every single one of us, our blood. And look, it is so much more than just a red liquid. It's this complex, amazing crew of couriers, soldiers, and repair specialists, all on a nonstop mission to keep you alive and kicking.
So let's start with a big question. What is this river of life exactly? I mean, it makes up about 8% of your total body weight, but what's actually in it? What's it made of?
Well, if you break it down, your blood is really a mix of two main things. About 55% of it is this yellowish, protein-rich liquid called plasma. And the other 45%, that's what we call the cellular elements. You've got your red cells, white cells, and platelets, all just floating around in that plasma, each with a super important job to do. So here's what we're going to cover in this explainer. First, we'll look at the workplace where blood does its thing. Then we'll meet the key players, the oxygen delivery crew, the defense and repair team, and finally, we'll get into how blood acts as our own personal and very critical ID.
Okay, so first up, the workplace. Your blood operates within the circulatory system. You can just picture this massive, intricate network of highways and side streets that connects every single part of your body. And the blood itself? Well, that's all the traffic, constantly moving, carrying vital cargo to every last destination. Its core mission really is transport. Think of it as the ultimate logistics company. It's delivering the essentials, like oxygen from your lungs and nutrients from your food. And on the return trip, it's hauling away all the waste products, like carbon dioxide. But it doesn't stop there. It's also in charge of regulating your body temperature and delivering important messages through hormones. It's a busy, busy system. So, who's actually handling all these deliveries? Well, the most numerous members of the team by a long shot are the red blood cells, also known as erythrocytes. Their one mission, which is absolutely critical, is to run the oxygen express.
And when I say numerous, the scale it's just hard to wrap your head around. Get this, that number, 5.4 million, is how many red blood cells you'd find in a single microliter of blood. A microliter is so tiny you can barely see it. A single drop of blood has about 50 of them. So we are talking about 250 million cells in just one drop. It's absolutely staggering.
And every single one of those billions of cells works its tail off for about 120 days. After that, it gets retired and recycled by the body. Just think about that. It means your body is churning out millions of new red blood cells every single second in your bone marrow, all just to keep that oxygen express running on schedule. So how do they actually carry the oxygen? What's the secret? It's a special protein called hemoglobin. This is what gives blood its famous red color. The best way to picture it is like a tiny 4-seater car, where each seat is perfectly designed to grab and hold on to one oxygen molecule for the ride through your body. And this whole system has to be absolutely perfect. This quote here really drives it home. A single, tiny error in that hemoglobin protein, we're talking one wrong building block out of hundreds, is what causes sickle cell anemia. That one little mistake completely warps the red blood cell into a stiff sickle shape that gets stuck in tiny blood vessels and just breaks apart. It's incredible how much depends on getting it exactly right. Okay, so if the red cells are the delivery trucks on this massive highway, what about security? What about roadside assistance? Well, that's where the defense and repair crew comes in. Their job is to protect the whole system from invaders and patch up any leaks that might happen. Now, this crew is made up of two key, highly specialized groups. First, you've got the white blood cells. They're the body's security and defense force. And then you've got the platelets, which act as the rapid response repair team. The white cells, they are the vigilant security guards of your body. I mean, they are constantly patrolling your bloodstream, your tissues, always on the lookout for threats like bacteria, viruses, and even rogue tumor cells. They are the absolute backbone of our immune system. And then you've got the platelets, and what's wild is these aren't even full cells. They're actually little fragments that get pinched off from these giant cells in the bone marrow. You can think of them as the emergency repair crew, always circulating, just waiting for the signal that there's been an injury somewhere on that circulatory highway. And the repair process is this incredible 3-step emergency protocol. It's fascinating. So first, the moment a blood vessel gets damaged, it reflexively squeezes shut to slow down the leak. Instantly, the platelets get the signal and they swarm the site, forming a temporary plug. But that's just the first patch-up job.
The final step is this amazing chemical cascade that creates a tough, fibrous net called a fibrin clot, which seals the breach for good. This whole rapid sequence is called hemostasis, and it's what stops a tiny paper cut from becoming a really big problem.
Okay, but there's one more crucial detail we have to talk about. Not all of these blood teams are identical. Every single person's blood has a unique ID, and getting the wrong ID during something like a blood transfusion, that isn't just a mistake, it can be a fatal one.
So how is this identity determined? Well, the surface of every single one of your red blood cells is decorated with specific molecules called antigens. The easiest way to think about them is as a kind of ID badge that basically tells your body's immune system, hey, I belong here. I'm one of the good guys. And this brings us to the main blood types in what's called the ABO system. It's actually pretty simple. Your blood type is named for the antigen ID badges on your red cells. But here is the crucial part. Your body's immune system creates antibodies, the security guards, to attack the antigens you don't have. So, if you're type A, your body has anti-B antibodies, and so on. And this is what sets the stage for a potential conflict. This whole antigen and antibody system is what creates two very special categories. People with type O blood have no A or B ID badges on their cells, so no one's immune system is going to attack it. That makes them the universal donor. And then on the flip side, you have type AB people. They have both A and B antigens, so their bodies don't make antibodies against either one. They can safely receive any blood type, which makes them the universal recipient.
And this is exactly why matching blood types is so critical. If you give type A blood to a person with type B blood, their anti-A antibodies will immediately go on the attack against those donated red cells. This causes the cells to clump up and burst, which is a really dangerous reaction that can lead to kidney failure and even death.
Now, beyond that ABO system, there's another really important ID marker called the Rh factor. You're either Rh positive or Rh negative, and this becomes especially critical during pregnancy. If an Rh negative mother is carrying an Rh positive baby, her body can start to develop antibodies that might attack the red blood cells of a future Rh positive baby. It's a serious issue.
So, to wrap it all up, it's pretty clear that blood is so much more than a simple red fluid, right? It's a dynamic, highly coordinated team. You've got the red cells handling transport, the white cells and platelets providing defense and repair, and this whole complex ID system of antigens that is absolutely vital for keeping us safe in medical situations.
And that leaves us with this really fascinating idea. The blood that unites every single one of us as humans is also the very thing that makes each of us unique. So as science keeps pushing forward, what's next? Will we see artificial blood one day? Gene therapies that can fix these tiny defects before they even cause a problem? The story of this river of life is far from over. Thanks for joining this explainer.